Well, hello and welcome to episode 192 of the Adoption Fostering Podcast from the A&amp Network with me, Scott Casson Renee, himself.
Al Coates. I don't know why I did that. I think I'm nervous.
Are you nervous?
I think I am. Because we've got a guest and I don't know the guest that well. So I get a bit giddy when we've got a new guest.
Yeah, you do. And who is our guest this evening, Al?
Our guest is Sarah Thomas, the Chief Executive of the Fostering Network. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
And welcome, Sarah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. It's really, really lovely to be invited. I'm very glad to be here on your podcast.
Oh, you're very welcome. See if you're saying that in an hour's time, but that's good that you've started off on that thing, and we can see where we go with it.
Better class of guest. Better class of guest, this, isn't it? We're lifting the bar here. The Fostering Network's been on our radar, I think, but we've never sort of quite managed to do it. And I think maybe that was with the previous CEO. And I think that I don't know, it's just not happened. And I think that's maybe, I don't know, busyness of life and stuff. So really pleased to have you on because as a podcast, we talk to lots of different people from often different places now, or listeners similarly. So could you explain who the Fostering Network are? Because it sounds grand.
Yeah, it's not that grand, but we are there for the fostering sector. So we are a charity first and foremost. So and I should say I've been in post now about a year. So any of your previous invites, I haven't been ignoring them or anything. They went to somebody else, not me. But it is just over a year since I was appointed as chief exec. And prior to that, I was the director for all of our work in Wales because I'm based in Wales. So I don't live in London or anywhere where some of our previous chief execs have lived. So I bring a bit of a different perspective to the organisation in relation to devolution and how things work in different parts of the country and how we can learn from each other, I would say. But generally what we do is provide membership to foster carers and fostering services and others in the world who want to support fostering, like through our fostering friendly employers scheme. So we just look at various ways in which we can improve fostering or enhance fostering and the outcomes for children and foster carers, and think of ways in which we can bring that to the rest of society, basically. So that's what we do. And we campaign, and we've always been pushing for change. And the greatest thing for me in relation to our new strategy and where we're going in the future is to make sure that we really do achieve that change, because I think there's a lot of challenges in the fostering world at the moment, huge, significant issues that need to be addressed, and we need to be talking about them, and we need to be putting forward comprehensive proposals as to how they could improve.
And it seems to me that fostering has been, in that position for quite a while, but it's only, in the last maybe year, 2 years that it's really come to the fore because, lack of foster carers, children being put into emergency kind of care and moved very quickly, or, all that sort of stuff that goes with that. And it just seems like it's been brewing for quite a while. And the last couple of years has seen it really come to the fore. And it's just basically getting attention, maybe not fully, but yeah, it's started to get there. Would that be right? Or
I think so. I think to address societal problems, society has got to see it as problems, if that makes sense. And I think fostering and care experience, lots of these terminologies and words are not very day-to-day in society, are they? It's a select few people that understand them and know about how that all works. So yeah, there's been more organisations raising awareness. I think there's been lots more work in relation to listening to children and participation and really shaping it so that it improves for their outcomes. And as a result of that, it's gaining a bit of momentum. That in addition to, us hitting over 100,000 children looked after in the UK. It's a pretty shocking figure, really. And at the same time as we hit that figure, we hit an all-time low in relation to recruitment and decline of foster care numbers. So there's so many things coming together now. It would be very difficult for a government not to take notice and to listen and do something.
Talking to governments, we've got, the care review is run by was run by now MP Josh McAllister.
Mhm.
Whatever he's got, I don't know. He's got
Mm.
letters after his name, whatever it is. And you're right. It's probably, now is the time. It seems to be, this last is it 2 weeks since Labour
Yeah.
won?
Yeah,
Yeah.
2 weeks
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
Seems to me that actually this is on their radar and it's also on the Lib Dems radar as well. I know they're not in power, but this seems to be the right time for that kind of change because we've not heard about it spoken. We've not heard it spoken about in public or we've just not seen it by the previous government for a number of years now.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. It's definitely feels to me like there's a huge shift in the approach. And, we work very closely with the policy team at the Department for Education. And I've been really impressed with how swiftly the new ministers are getting out and getting active. Like they're not stopping for breath. It's really, really happening very quickly. And one of the other things, like when you look at all the new appointments to the cabinet, these are people with lived experience in the area that they're being asked to deliver on. The new children's minister that's just recently been announced, Janet Dabby in England, she's a social worker who's worked in fostering. It's just, I've not heard that happen in my time that I've been working in this sector. In Wales, that's sort of always been the case. We've always had a social worker. Julie Morgan was our previous children's minister. We had Mark Drakeford. In Scotland, there's been much more attention to knowledge of the role before you get those appointments. So yes, quite groundbreaking, I think, for England, it feels like at the moment.
Yeah.
Which means it's the right foundations for change.
Oh, that was a good answer, that. I see what you did. You've been on the media training. Excellent.
I haven't done any media training. I'd quite like to do some media training, but I've had very little opportunity. I've just been thrown in and potentially thrown under the bus a number of times, just like said, there we go, off you go.
Yeah. What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, maybe tonight's the night. Well, I've no idea.
No.
Yeah. I've never heard of a career that we've ruined so far, but apart from to be fair, yeah. I mean, you're talking about ministers there. It's an interesting point, isn't it? Because especially towards the end of the last government, we had how many ministers? How many children's ministers?
7 or something. Outrageous, wasn't it?
We had 10 in the space of the last government.
Yeah. So, certainly some of them had no experience whatsoever of, they were maybe parents, but they certainly didn't have, the kind of experience that, you would hope.
One was a farmer.
Yeah, absolutely. He was the one that we kind of think that we did jinx him a little bit, but that's whatever. He was more interested in these children.
But I mean, I don't want to I don't want to speak ill of those that have gone before us, but let's just lean into that a little bit. What is shocking is that was a minister who literally had to be coached into a meeting, and now we've got someone like Janet Danby who's been a registered manager of a foster care agency, and then has gone on to politics, and so maybe it's not like she's been elevated out of the social work ranks like over the last fortnight. She's someone who is got a really like a developed understanding, but also a developed understanding of government. So you need both. Like putting me in charge of going to the shops for crisps would be a disaster. So you need people who've got the skills. And I wanted to ask a question, which is maybe a sort of a step back from all of the current stuff. But in the legislation, the fostering service regulations, you're probably terrifying me getting into the long grass here. But there's this element that it's a legal requirement of fostering services, so that whether those be local authorities or they be independent, that they have to provide an independent support service to foster carers. And that historically, for a long, long period, was the fostering network, wasn't it? That people would be sort of signed up to the support to support foster carers. And so is that still sort of the bedrock of the work that you do?
It's a huge part of the work that we do. I should just to clarify, because I'm quite pernickety about regs. That's just in England. So that specific requirement is only in the English regs. It's not in Wales or Scotland or Northern Ireland. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be, but that's how it is at the moment. And we run independent support and advice and mediation service. So a lot of local authorities will contract that from us. So they'll, just say, we need a worker and we'll come to you whenever there's cases. And they're really proactive at providing that for their foster carers. And then others, foster carers will have to ask for it, and then the service will spot purchase it, and they'll spot purchase like 10 hours or 15 hours. And we have a large pool of independent social workers, so they're all generally experienced in fostering, and they'll all have had varying levels of time in practice, and they'll support. We try and do them in like location based so that people can actually have that support physically as well as because the world's gone quite screen focused, doesn't it? But when you're going through an allegation or concern, standards of care, those sorts of things really do need a different approach. I think you can't do those sorts of things over a screen, can you? Or you can't do them as effectively. So it is still a big part of what we do, but not the bedrock, I would say. It's there if carers need it and if services commission it for them. I worry more about the people that don't get that, to be honest, and there's no service there. It's in the regulations, but it's not funded by government or funded centrally. So it's all about ad hoc, which means we have far too many foster carers are left without support during those situations. I think that's the bigger worry, really.
Because that then sort of feeds into because there's a couple of things that we were hoping you talked about, and things that you sort of flagged up to us that you'd like to talk about. One being the state of the nation, your state of the nation survey. Is that the wrong word? That's the wrong word, isn't it?
No, it is a survey. Yeah.
And so that was that. Why are you undertaking that? 'Cause go back to the very, very first contact we had from your press office, which was in terms of trying to correct some of that, because I think there was a bit of a miscommunication on one of our previous podcasts, which is where we started a rumor about beef between you and Foster Wiki, which got out of hand because people started to believe it, and there's just no beef there. So we apologise. So in terms of the state of the nation. Can you tell? I feel like I'm dotting around all over the bit, but the work that you do directly with foster carers, does that inform the state of the nation? And is that where it came from? And what is the function of that?
So the state of the nation started several years ago, and we do it every 3 years. And it is because there's such little data, or there has been historically, very little information about what is the experiences of foster carers. So as an organisation and a charity in this sector, that's where that started basically. And the last survey that we did was in 2021, and we had just over 3,300 responses to that from foster carers and 100 fostering services. So, and that was used to create basically to support and create our work with an agenda for working with governments, basically. So that's where it came from. That's how we use it. And we redo it every 3 years. So it's only just closed. It's actually been out over the last couple of weeks. We closed it on the 30th of June, I think it was. So I can't really talk about that because it's, subject to analysis, and we're using an advisor in a university to take through all the data and to make sure that it's really quality assured, so that we're not reporting on things that are not accurate and really representative of the fostering sector. But yeah, that's where the state of the nation comes from. I think there are more opportunities now for people to share information, and there are other surveys, and I wholeheartedly welcome that because it's really important. We've got 60,000 fostering families, and we know very little about how they are experiencing fostering on a day-to-day basis. And that is also gained momentum. I think we've got much more insight now, and we're getting much more intelligence as to relation to what needs to change and how it is on a day-to-day basis as a foster carer.
Mm. And I guess as well, I'm just thinking about, because obviously we have Adoption UK on more or less annually to talk about the Brommer. So it's a similar kind of version of that, but it's obviously yours is, 3 years. But also this thing about, you can never have too much data. I mean, yes,
No.
it's a nightmare for somebody who's a data analysis to crunch the data and the figures and stuff.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
you will reach people that other organizations don't reach, and vice versa. So it's
Yeah.
that mix, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's really important that you get the right questions and that you ask the right questions so that, you know, they're not leading, and that you can make sure that you use them effectively afterwards. And consent from people and things. You know, the reason we do it every 3 years is because it's a huge amount of work. That's why it's not annual. And I know, you know, that I went to the adoption barometer launch this year, and again, it's a huge amount of work to find out that information. And the difference, I would say, is the scale. So obviously we've got a few thousands in the adoption pool every year, isn't it? New adopters and things. You know, we're in the tens of thousands in relation to fostering, and the numbers of children in foster in comparison to adoption. So, you know, the size and scale just makes it a little bit more complicated to do. But yeah, all data and all insight is really, really valuable. Everybody needs to be sitting up and listening to what foster carers are saying.
What do you anticipate then being the, because I mean, we're sort of quoting Foster Wiki, but Foster Wiki have sort of brought a very different voice into the arena, because in terms of them, it's by foster carers for foster carers, and they're very, very much a very strong campaigning component to what they do, and speaking with sort of really sort of tangibly direct experience that's now. And the fostering network is not that. I'm not saying it's just different. It's very much a sort of a very long established organization that covers a lot of bases. And so what are your perspectives on some of the calls that we see from some of those voices that are, you know, people who are carers, the carers are speaking for themselves, which is kind of, it's a new voice in the arena, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of the voices and the calls are very similar to what was in our last State of the Nation, you know, and I imagine will be very similar to what's coming through in this State of the Nation. That's the problem, really, that we actually hear similar themes, similar patterns, similar experiences from all sorts of different surveys and voices and on social media and things. What I'm most focused on is what we do about it. You know, I really need us to be thinking about how we work. And it is difficult. You have to find that fine line between constant criticism and offering solutions. And I think, you know, one of the things that I really want us to do as an organisation is to be collaborating and coming together as a united voice to seek solutions. Because what happens when you've got lots of different voices saying lots of different things, what you end up with is inertia and nothing actually changing. And that's what you see in all sorts of parts of the sector in relation to other aspects. And I just need us to, you know, I'm happy to collaborate and listen to the voice of every single foster care in the UK and make sure that we represent them and that we take forward their views, because I want things to change. That's what I want us to be measured against, the impact and the difference that we can make if we present a shared voice and a cohesive solution.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's kind of reflective of maybe adoption 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when that kind of when regionalisation started to take place, really, because we had no choice but to work collaboratively. But I think that had been going on a little bit before that. But I think that, you know, the voices of foster carers is very different to the voices of adoptive parents in terms of what they need, how they ask for it, you know, all that kind of. It's almost like a different kind of not approach. I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but it's almost like they're a different set of people, because these people are fostering because they believe that they want to support these children who are in the care system for whatever reason. And that's a lot to take on when you know that at some point that child can then either go back into the birth family or go on to another kind of form of permanence. So it's a very different type of person, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, that fosters, as to one that just goes into, you know, become a permanent parent of a child.
And unless, of course, they come forward to do long-term fostering, because, you know, the thing in fostering is that there are so many different types, isn't it? You know, there's technically only two, short-term and long-term, but short-term can mean anything. And you know, long term, I think is often misused and should only be used when it is in relation to providing permanency for the rest of that child's life, you know. And I think I get quite upset when I see, you know, situations that foster carers have been put in, which through no fault of their own, have ended really badly. Like the way that we talk about allegations sometimes, like when I unpick the practice that happens, I often think, well, that isn't an allegation as a start. That's a care standards concern. Why is it being labelled as such? Why have we done that process? You haven't done a proper investigation. There's so much that could improve in relation to that practice that would then ensure that less children are having to move on from fostering environments where they were really stable and happy until that point. And also the way in which, you know, cases are assessed, and make sure that we're really, really clear that if we are placing a child on a long-term basis in foster care, that the foster care understands this means no one else is here for this child. You are, you know, it's adoption with a different legal status ultimately, because that's what the child needs. And if you didn't come forward to do that, we need people who have, because this is what the child needs.
Well, that's a really interesting point about permanence, because I look at permanence, I look at the sort of the building blocks of legislation on that, and actually it is maybe on paper it's a different legal status, but actually the foster carer doesn't change anything tangibly for them in terms of, it's not a special guardianship order where parental responsibilities legally moved to a parent. So it still feels quite fragile for a lot of families.
It is, yeah.
And I was joking because I mean it's almost like an apocryphal story, but you know, I have a foster carer who, you know, got a phone call, can you look after a child over the weekend? And 8 years later, you know, literally 8 years later. But sort of moving into permanence, do you think that there is an argument for somewhere between special guardian and fostering, where children do actually get permanence that gives children rights and parents rights? And sort of foster parents' rights.
Or we review and improve special guardianship, because I don't think it's being used correctly at the moment. And if it were to be used correctly, then yes, that's what we should really be seeing, isn't it? That's meant to be the permanency order that is in between fostering and adoption. And what it isn't is properly funded and supported for it to work in the best interest of children. So foster carers are, you know, they will take out SGOs, but they know that there'll be a detriment to them, but also to the child. You know, if you're in care at the age of 18, then your rights and entitlements and your university payments and when I'm ready, all those, I say when I'm ready because that's the Wales, I mean staying put in England. Are you a UK podcast? I think you are.
We're international, I'd have you know.
International podcast. I do apologise. So, you know, there are going the extra mile, staying put, continuing care, all those different things for children when they turn 18. And yet we don't have those applicable to SGOs. So why? What is it in the best interest of a child to have that, secure that permanence through that order?
It does feel like special guardianship. The push to special guardianship is more about the local authority kind of freeing up resources and less about what is this in the best interest of the child and the foster carers.
In the same way that those post-18 arrangements as well, you know, they're absolutely fantastic policy, but if there's no funding, you're basically saying to a foster carer, you know, little Johnny wants to stay, is that okay with you? They say, yes, of course, he's my boy, I don't want him to go anywhere else, but by the way, we don't pay you anymore, or if we do, it's this token sum over here now. So I just, you know, I don't know any foster carer that doesn't do what's in the right interest of children. That is what they're there for. That's what they want to do. But we have to create systems and structures that support them to do it properly.
Yeah.
We're the ones letting them down, not the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any system perfect. And over the summer, we've got a foster carer from Austria. We've recorded a podcast with an Austrian foster carer, which is again really interesting. But I know that in America, for example, all children who've been in the foster care system, they get free funding at college. Not like they've got the 2 college system, so it's like community college. But you think, well, yeah, it's not, you don't have to ask for it. You don't have to. It's just like that's what it is. Full stop. So it's on the cards. How many access that I don't know, but.
Well, I mean, even in Ireland, you know, and we're only a little thing across the water. There's not much in, but we've got very different kind of setups in government. And I know through personal experience, anybody who was previously looked after, you get extra points to go to university. I don't know how that works in the UK, but certainly, that's only because that's personal experience here at the minute, because we've got our youngest who's going to university. But even like accommodation, you're prioritized because of that status and all that sort of stuff. So, and I think that's right. I mean, there should be elements of that as well, but it doesn't matter what permanence they've had. It's just the fact that they've had these experiences and they deserve to have the same kind of opportunities that everybody else has if they want to take it up,
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask you then, in terms of fostering as it is, what do you can I ask you about recruitment? Because I think that's probably something that a lot of people who aren't involved in foster care kind of, every roundabout that I seem to go around is asking me to become a foster carer from a local authority. So can you give me your perspective on what are the challenges to recruitment, how we've got ourselves into this state, and do you have an idea of how the heck we're going to get ourselves out? Because we've got the recruitment hubs, haven't we? That's a big question, isn't it? Over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, there's lots of initiatives going on about recruitment, and this was my bread and butter. I was the senior practitioner for recruitment, and I absolutely love talking about recruitment. This is what we did, and we did some transformation in relation to our practice and recruited 40 new foster carers in the space of 2 years and had fabulous retention rates and really changed things at a local level in an individual local authority at that time. In order to achieve that on a wider scale, you have to have two things. And one of them is collaboration. And, that's not at its greatest between local authorities. I remember dealing with the person who applied who actually lived in the neighbouring LA, and I would be hesitant to say, do you know that they foster over the fence over there? Because actually you need every foster care you can get. And that is a fact. There are lack of resource. So even LAs are in competition with each other. That's not a good starting place. You have to come out of that place. And then secondly, you need funding, because to do really effective recruitment campaigns, you have to be able to put money into it. And I don't know if you know about Foster Wales, the national collaboration. So all 22 local authorities now come under the one umbrella. They're called Foster Wales, and they have the same brand, and they behave to all intents and purposes as one organisation. So there's no more 22 competing brands trying to compete for the same pool of foster carers, because there's a very small pool of foster carers across the UK and prospective foster. Very few people will actually have all the skills, abilities, the space, everything that you need, all those key ingredients to come forward and give part of your life to other children. It's a really key, role for somebody in society, and that there's not a huge pool. So we have to make it as attractive, as inviting, and reduce the level of competition as much as possible if we're actually going to get people through to fully approved foster carers. So we need national campaigns. That's the first thing. I think we need a national strategy. We have lots of national strategies for other things, but nothing around this particular piece. The government are talking a lot about recruiting teachers, and they've recognised the shortages there. We need to do the same for social workers and talk about that as a good career path for people when they're in university. And we also need a national recruitment campaign for foster carers that really looks at all of the aspects of it on a national basis. What could we be doing?
Because we have, the model we've got for adoption is we've got a national adoption week, we've got Adoption England, we've got the government is prepared to put money into a national strategy and not directing anyone to any specific agency, just saying we need more adopters. And you would think that is even more obvious for foster carers. We don't care where you go, but just go somewhere, please.
Yeah, exactly. The only thing I would say about that is that if you're thinking about it from a child's perspective, we also need them to go somewhere where they can be accessed by a child who needs them locally. So, in my time in this sector, when I first started out 20 years ago, almost every single child was placed in our local authority. Nobody changed schools. It was very rare, that somebody would have to go such a distance that they'd need a new school, new GP, new change of everything, no more of their activities, friends, all of that, 30 minutes drive to contact, all those things were not commonplace. Whereas now we're talking 2 hours drive to go to school or to contact, we haven't got it right. And it's the main reason that we're calling for a register, because I think there are lots of benefits for foster carers, huge benefits for children, and lots of benefits for fostering services if we begin to have some more understanding about our foster care workforce. Basically, that's what we don't have across the board right now.
Interesting. And just when you're chatting there, I'm thinking about this argument about the ability for foster carers to transfer easily between agencies. What's your take on that one?
Yeah, so the transfer protocol is something that the Foster Network designed, and we've recently reviewed them all and updated them so that they're fit for purpose. That's what's a huge challenge for foster carers, I think. You're assessed by a single agency, and you can only be assessed and approved by a single agency. But then when you say you want to go somewhere else or change, or you've changed your mind, you have to start all over again, which is hugely complex and just unnecessary bureaucracy for everybody. It doesn't make any sense. So the purpose of a register would mean that that person's approval would be registered, just like with a social worker register. We have a register that you are on, and you can change jobs or move between services. Your registration remains. In fact, it's totally separate to that. The fact that you have to do your professional development and upload it onto your portal every year, those things are about, I've demonstrated I'm fit to be a social worker. I've demonstrated my continued practice development, and therefore I can choose to work where I wish to. And that is the same approach. That's what the principle that we're trying to apply in the register in relation to foster carers. So they've got that improved portability.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it's interesting the comparison there, because the social workers do that. So why, foster carers are as equally as professional as a social worker.
Well,
and if you go to evidence, then surely that should just be.
Foster carers are doing this task in their home alone and supervised. When we talk about the register with people, they're often really surprised that there isn't one. They can't understand why we don't have that. When we've asked so many other parts of the sector to register, like childminders, there's registers of childminders. We've got registers for residential care workers, childcare workers. There's differences across each of the countries of the UK, but and registers exist right across Europe and internationally. Foster carers are registered. So we've done quite a lot of work on this, because our policy and campaigns team have really been working with all 4 governments to talk to them about what difference this could make.
But there are, I know that there's an argument against a register, isn't there? Or there's some people who think that the register is, I'm not quite clear. I don't quite understand the argument itself, but are you familiar with the argument? Can you I'm asking you to ask the question to yourself. Not very good at it.
Leave it to the guest to explain it. Well,
I'll be honest, one of my foster carers just messaged me, so I was answering that question.
Is it about the register?
It is. It's literally about the register. And okay.
So I don't know all of the challenges, and this is really early days. There's a lot more scoping, a lot more consultation. We really need to work more closely with foster carers. We've done some small pockets of consultation so far, and we need to do much more to find out what the worries are. But I attended a meeting a couple of weeks ago with Foster Care Association chairs. So I've been trying to work as closely as I possibly can with foster carers right across the UK. And in England, I went to this foster carer chair group. And they were asking me various questions. And what we got to at the end of the meeting was actually they hadn't understood what it was. And I think we haven't done a very good job as an organisation of explaining how it could work, what it could include, what it might not include, and what it might not do. And actually, because you can't shape it yet, it's for the government to shape, not us. We're putting forward a call that we think this would help the status of foster carers. There's a definite safeguarding aspect in there for children, because I've worked in fostering for 20 years. I've done assessments on people, and there's some that I held on to that I remember, I discovered too late that they'd been approved somewhere else. And and it hadn't gone very well, but there was no way of me finding that out unless they chose to disclose it to me. And, you know, in my time managing the fostering team, we had a number of those examples. And then I also had them since I've been working in the third sector. So we do have to think about that. Key priority is the safeguarding one, but there's also status, there's also portability, and that more transparency around the fostering sector. Yeah, so lots of different benefits, but it could go as far or as wide as people want it to when it comes to it.
Yeah.
It does. I mean, I think I've sort of spoken to carers who were quite surprised that they're almost tied. Well, they are tied to an agency and authority. Yeah. And it does seem quite an archaic way of, which is similar to adoption, I guess, isn't it? That the person who does the assessment doesn't own you, but
no.
They don't own you, but they have a sort of a say in what you do and where you go, and have potential. And if that relationship in any way, for whatever reason, becomes slightly fractious, the foster carer, the power dynamics are set hugely against the foster carer, aren't they?
Oh, hugely so. And also, you know, we're not saying that the intellectual property is not that shared ownership between the person who's been assessed and the service. You know, there's a huge amount of work that goes into a good quality fostering assessment on both sides. But that doesn't mean that that person should lose their status as a foster carer. The approval status should be portable. And even if you were transferring, a recruiting service might say, do you know what? We'd like to do a few other checks. We'd like you to do some additional training. These are the types of children that we need you to care for. So you're going to need to do X, Y, and Z to build up your skills in that area. But ultimately, they could just go and check the register for that person's name, address, and whether there were any concerns, whether they had had a successful previous annual review. And it could just completely shift the way that fostering practice works at the moment. Because we know from our work that too many people leave fostering just because their local authority or fostering service terminates them of approval for one reason or another, and they would have actually stayed, you know. So, yeah.
I mean, again and again, when I talk to people who've been foster carers, you often when I'm at recruitment events, people go, "Oh, I used to be a foster carer," and they'll tell you their story, and almost inevitably, it's very rarely about the children, the reason that they left. It's people go into fostering understanding that children are vulnerable, that there might be, you know, it's not going to be plain sailing with children, but that's what they're signing up for. What often people are really surprised about is the kind of the challenges of the system, and maybe that child protection system, you know, the team around the child, and how that can be quite a complicated place for a lot of people. But foster carers often feel at the very bottom rung of that, don't they?
Oh, definitely. You know, you talked earlier about recruitment, and I always use that when I think about what are we asking from these people, because I did a workshop earlier this week because I've been involved with the recruitment hubs in England and helping them to shape those and move them forward. And I did a recruitment workshop with one of the largest hubs and was just asking them about how many relationships applicants have to build before they actually get to the point of meeting a child. And if you think about our general practice at the moment around this, you speak to somebody at an event or on a phone call, then somebody else comes out and does your home visit. Then somebody else meets you on a training course and helps you through your training. Then somebody else might come and do some checks and references. Or if you're lucky, you'll have one person that comes and does your consistent assessment process. So then when you get to panel, somebody else is allocated on that day because the assessor steps away and a new person steps in. And within 24 hours, you could be in the most vulnerable place you've been throughout the whole process with a child being in your care. And you've got your sixth person that you don't even know yet, who doesn't know what works well for you, can't provide the best possible match because they haven't read your Form F yet, because social workers are extremely busy under pressure, and with all the will in the world, they will want to have done that. But we know the reality of the service at the moment, it just doesn't happen. So even that, so I always talk about recruitment practice and the relationships we build with foster carers needing to start on day one. And I delivered that in a service where if you did the home visit, you also took them through training, you also did the assessment. So the first person they spoke to was the person that they were still speaking to when they had the first child matched to them. And it was really trusted. You know, foster carers, newly approved foster carers felt really trusted and held and scaffolded, and they said yes to children that others might have said no to, because they knew their supervising social worker was by their side, and we would ensure that they stayed with them for 6 to 12 months. So, that's relationship-based, child-centered recruitment and social care practice in fostering, I think. And that's what we need to be looking at doing across the board.
And that's interesting.
Talking through that process there, and that takes me back to my experience of fostering. That was very much like that. I mean, well, partially left fostering because we adopted our first placement, but also left and have never wanted to look. I know, but also because my husband constantly says we should foster again, and I'm like, no. And the reason for that was the relationship that we had. I'm sure she was lovely, but just some of the stuff that supervising social worker did really put me off kind of continuing down that route. And I think that's, I don't think that's uncommon from what I hear. Sticking their foot in the door when they were doing that visit thing that they do, unannounced
visit.
Sticking their foot in the door. I don't think it was a really good thing to do with me, because, she was very welcome to come in. There was no issues, but sticking the foot in the door like it was an aggressive kind of start to that visit. Really, that was kind of the death knell. That's awful. Well, it is, but that was the death knell for my fostering experience. Because I was just like, okay, when this goes through, we're not doing this again, kind of thing. So, and I don't think I think there's quite a few people that would have had not maybe the same, but a very similar experience in terms of people who think that they own the carer, when they're human beings who are doing a job.
I think there's a huge education piece here, because ultimately the mutual respect that should be shown between social workers, foster carers, IROs, everybody just needs to be seeing each other as critical to the outcomes for that child being positive. There is no hierarchy. There is, that there really shouldn't exist those sorts of behaviors and experiences. And I know that they do. And I think, there's a huge aspect that there's a huge shift that needs to happen here in relation to culture and value base and how we work together. And I do think that there is a place for the register to help with that, but it's much bigger. We really need to be educating social workers and talking to newly qualified social workers, thinking about how have we shaped this to make this a relationship-based approach, something that is about working together and not doing two. Why has it gone down that road? My social work training and experience was never about that. It wasn't. It just wasn't. It was, I remember being taught that, if you wouldn't place your own child there, then you hadn't finished your fostering assessment, and I took that on as a fostering manager. Lots of those things, the sort of remembering to think about any decisions as if this was your child. And you would do that with foster carers. I remember doing supervision sessions where you'd unpick, well, let's think about this now. What does it mean for little Johnny? What does it mean if we do this and that? And it was definitely a collaborative approach, not what seems to have become a transactional at best, and at worst maybe a bit aggressive, as you've just described.
Well, it feels like sometimes foster care is seen as a service provider.
Yeah.
And like you, we have a rule of thumb, and I'm a practice educator as well, so we have social work students, and I go, the first thing is, if you've got a child, would you leave them there? And that's just, and they may raise your child differently, in terms of what they get for dinner and what they have, what time they go to bed. But would you be able to leave your child there and know that your child is safe? Yeah. And that is, like, you think that's the bottom line. And I think that's so often we forget that it's people who foster give everything. They open their door, every bit of their life, to a child in a way that you as a professional don't. And we don't. We have a different role, and that's fine. But I think we need to just have a little bit of respect for that. And that it feels a simple respect, which sort of informs me. But I have to say, I have really positive experience as a foster carer. My fostering social work was just awesome.
And that it comes down to, again, it's about a relationship, isn't it? And if it isn't working, acknowledge it. I used to do a lot of shifting around with supervising social workers. If foster carers and the social worker thought, we haven't gelled, this isn't right for us, don't be forcing it. You have to work so closely together. You've got to get on. You've got to be able to do that challenge piece, challenge each other, think about things, unpick things. So yeah, we've got to go back to relationship-based practice, I think.
Yeah. And you've probably worked with foster carers who've, and I do, that have been foster carers for 10 years, and they know the system inside out, and they know their children inside out. I have foster carers who've literally separated children's social workers from their biological parents and going, everybody in the room needs to calm down, and really advocate, and brought really good, I don't want to say social work skills, but you know what I mean, be able to kind of say, this isn't how this is meant to work, and just an amazing level of skill and competence and knowledge and insight that is a resource we need to protect and value and draw on whenever possible. Ooh, tell you.
Yeah. And it's, how do we do that? How do we value it, given that we know that so many are not feeling valued at the moment? It feels like it's really systemic, that not everywhere, actually. I should say that I speak to just as many foster carers who are feeling very happy, really fulfilled. They feel really strongly that what they do is hugely rewarding, and they're really, really happy with their fostering service. But you have just as loud a voice saying, it's not that great over here. We're not feeling that we're treated in any way.
Be interesting, a track, like where those voices are coming from, because I think there's well, in terms of, are there pockets of just poor practice in terms of certain authorities? And because we know that independent foster care agencies generally rate a little bit higher, but then that's maybe them being understanding the whole consumer, customer, client kind of really understand that this is the most valuable thing we've got, is our foster carers. We need to love them, give them, show them some care. Yeah,
absolutely. I think the level of inconsistency is one of the other things that needs to be addressed. And, we've got, good fostering regs and standards of practice, but really, do we have a consistent approach? Because I don't think we do. We know caseloads could be anything, support levels could be anything. The reality is, on the ground, foster carers will be experiencing very different things depending on who they foster for. And that's not okay. That is another thing that prevents and is really restricting positive recruitment, because then we've got a really low level of retention because we haven't got the consistency piece right. So, which, it's very deep, isn't it? I didn't know this was how the podcast was going to go.
Well, welcome to our life. No, we still haven't got to the question yet. The question. And I also think as well, if you can't fix foster care without fixing social work, because you've got, as you mentioned there, I have foster care of their first foster placement, parent and child, amazing. And that young person had 7 social workers across a period of 5 months. It works out something like 20 days. And the foster care is like just demented, going, how on earth is this young person meant to achieve anything? When the young person, and the foster care sort of like, her head clicked and she went, right, you don't have to talk to them anymore, because who knows how long this next one's going to last. And she would just do all that stuff for them. But it was really disheartened by the system. People quite like, oh my goodness, I just didn't realize how bleak it is. Anyway. The thing is, there are solutions to everything. So there is hope and positivity. And I do strive on remembering that there are good potential solutions. The social work piece, I really think we need to start thinking about social workers having shift patterns instead of being expected to pretend that they work 9 to 5. You just said you had a message from a foster carer. So I remember when I was in frontline practice, and like I never had an evening or a weekend. I don't know what that was, and I think that is what we've got. We've seen social workers just say, I can't do this anymore. They're not staying with it, and therefore they're not progressing and building experience and becoming the really experienced senior leaders that we need, because people burn out before they get the opportunity to actually progress through their career. So I do think we need to think about completely reshaping social work, because social care is not 9 to 5. It's like pretending that the NHS just works 9 to 5. You need nurses, midwives, and social workers to be available at any time of the day. We can't. I think for many years there's been this pretense that an EDT, an emergency team with one person on a phone, can cover the whole of a local authority area.
by themselves overnight, and whatever comes in will be fine. It's just not. That's everybody can see that isn't working. So I do think we need, I'm not saying it needs 24-hour shift patterns, but I do think that if I was still in practice now and, you know, my children suffered, my family suffered, lots of people suffered because of how much dedication I gave to my work. But if I'd known someone else was coming on at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock, I might have actually felt like I could leave the foster cares, the families, the children. I could have gone home and maybe switched off, you know?
Yeah.
So I do think we have to think about the working conditions for social workers so that we can get that right, so that we can improve the working conditions for foster carers.
You're a revolutionary, Sarah.
Well, I was just going to, like, a couple of times I've just thought we need to just clone Sarah, because it just, like, but there's only so much one person can do. And it was, you know, it's great to have that lived experience of being a social worker as well and working in the sector. You need like 100 of you to be able to carry out in each agency.
Or we all need to come together. This is why I feel so strongly about so many different voices calling on government to do so many different things. When if we were united, because I believe actually that most people who are advocating on behalf of foster carers, we're actually probably all along the same lines. We're looking for the same things. And we just need to work more collaboratively and align with each other so that when we go to government and ask for something, it's not 10 versions of what could be the same thing, but it's not cohesive. So nobody listens and takes note. And
also there's that thing about it being achievable and what you can change as well. So, you know, you need to start with the priorities and then kind of work down your list, I guess, isn't it? And your priorities might be different to, you know, another, you know, agency or whatever.
But at the end of the day, if you keep children and their outcomes at the centre, like, you know, the recruitment example I gave, all of that is about creating an environment so that the child, on the day that they move in, they've got the best possible foster carer ready, prepared and feeling supported to care for them, because it's them that we're thinking about by making sure that it's the same person that builds that relationship, that's trusting and enables that foster carer to do what they need to do, feeling fully supported. And I find that if you bring it back to that, even when you're talking about money and allowances, all the difficult conversations, if you just step out for a second and think, well, what would it mean for the child? You know, what would the impact be on the child? What would I want if this were my child? You just come to the right answer every single time. It's never failed me. So that's my approach, and I'm sticking with it.
Sarah, it's been fascinating to talk to you, and I feel like actually we need to get you back on because we could go through the 2021 State of the Nation, but it feels like when are you going to produce that? When are you going to?
So it's being analysed at the moment. So it'll be launched in the autumn.
So even as we speak, minions in foster network towers are beavering away with abacuses, and
I think Sarah's toes are tapping away on a keyboard under her desk there. And she's analysing it. Well, that would be perfect actually to have you back after that's come out to talk about it, because I think that would be really interesting to look at, and secondly to kind of open up that discussion a bit as well about it and where it's going.
We could get Foster Wiki on as well. We could have a Foster Wiki. No, we would not do that. That'd be crazy. Scott,
I think working together is key. I do have to say, everybody in the sector, I'm actually more than happy to talk with and work alongside everyone. We just need to be working together.
Yeah, and Sarah, I totally agree, because I'm in the FASD sector in Ireland. There's very few of us, but it's anything to do with the kind of brain and neurodiversity and stuff like that. They're all doing their own things, and in actual fact, we could achieve so much more if we were all collaborating together. So I
speak with one voice, and I think the one thing that really sticks in my head in terms of Foster Wiki, for example, is that what I do know is they 100% want what's in the best interest of children. That is laser beam focus, and talking to you, it's clear that's exactly what you want, and that we can agree on that. Let's work out from there. Scott has what we like to call the question. We haven't asked it in a long time, but we did get an email, didn't we, recently, Scott, from our friends in America. Friends in America,
God,
Scott.
that question. I thought it was a simpler question. That okay.
Could we stick with the simple question? Because I don't know what's about to happen.
I'll tell you, I'll do a little pause before I ask it, because then if it gets too much, we can ask the simple question and we can edit that bit out.
Okay.
Oh God, I can't even remember what they call it now. Cons
No, it's we can just go with thruple. I think we can go
oh
with.
yeah, so yeah, so what are your thoughts on thruples fostering? So basically a couple of years ago we interviewed people in America who I think they called it consensual poly something or other. I can't remember what it was called. There is an official
Consensual
title.
non-monogamy, but they are a thruple. They're a
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And essentially they'd adopted and they brought this other person into their kind of life as a partner, a life partner. So it wasn't, it wasn't anything kind of, just temporary. It was a permanent thing that was happening. And I think it has made us kind of question that with a number of people who come on and discuss it. And I guess just thinking about, fostering and how it might work for that. I mean,
Yeah. Who can
we,
foster?
yeah, because we got an update a couple of weeks ago from them. They love to email us because they know they get talked about on this podcast all the time. They're obviously avid listeners. I think well, I won't say what state they're in, but they're in America anyway. So they like to keep us updated with where they are, and they are going for re-licensing. I think they call it licensing in the
Yeah.
US to fostering. They're going for to renew the license and as a 3. So I'm just wondering, just really wondering what your thoughts on it were, because it seems to be quite a common thing, but people hide it rather than being open about it, and then it gets all messy when it's been hidden and there's trust issues, and I'm talking about between the professionals and the family kind of thing. So I'm just wondering, it's a bit of a curveball question, but any thoughts on it?
I think so. I would go back to my usual position on this, which is what's the impact on the child?
Mhm.
So thinking about it from the child's perspective, what you're saying is that there would be 3 loving, caring adults who would want them and would raise them as 3 individuals who wanted the best for them. So instead of there being 2 or 1, because we know that many single foster carers do incredibly well. We know that couples do incredibly well. And you're saying that there would be a 3rd person that would be part of that arrangement.
Yeah.
So bearing in mind that I have no knowledge of any regulatory impacts or reflections or how anybody else would view this,
Nicely put.
purely on the
Nicely
basis of the impact of the child, I don't see how that would be in any way negative for them if it was a good match and all the other factors were right for them. I think it's about our ability to be able to talk honestly, openly, be transparent, and to actually, again, accept each other for who they are, and to be able to work with everybody as, in an equitable way. So, I that's my view on that. One of the things I would say to you, we talked about long-term fostering earlier, and before any long-term assessment came to our fostering panel, we had a really strong rule that they also had to have somebody approved alongside them to be their significant adult, is what we called it. Because after you were long-term, there was no more asking for, respite or other sorts of supports, because it was like, you've said you'll be, effectively mum and dad for life, or mum and mum, or dad and dad. Whatever you've said for life. You've made that commitment. So little Johnny's got to be able to go to your friends for sleepovers, just like any other child would in that natural family arrangement. So sounds to me a bit like, having extra people to support, and if ensure that the good outcomes for the child, I don't see why that wouldn't be a positive thing overall.
No, it's interesting.
Yeah, your social work registration is safe again. I think you passed that test. We'll not be referring you to the Social Work England. Well, it's not Social Work England. Who was it in Wales?
It's Social Care Wales.
Social Care Wales. Well, I don't need to email them this evening.
Thank you. I'm grateful.
That's good news.
Thanks.
Sarah, it's been an absolute pleasure. I feel like we've just scratched the surface, and I'm not sure that you got to say what you want. Is there anything that you were like thinking, oh, right, this is why I'm coming on and I need to say this? Is there anything that we've not talked about you wanted to say?
I was going to talk a little bit about a play I went to see this week, which was actually on Tuesday night. And I don't know if you know about it and if your listeners might be interested in it, because it's running until the 3rd of August, and it's called The Children's Inquiry. And it's a play in Southwark Theatre. It's just exceptional. I was on a panel at the end of the play on Tuesday night, and it is the story of 4 young people and their care experience story, but brought to life by 10 professional young actors, and it's
Right.
just exceptional. It takes you through the history of all the different like social work milestones, you know, when Baby P and various other things, governments, political. It's just absolutely excellent. And people are able to go and see it. It's still running at the Southwark Playhouse until the 3rd of August.
Oh, well,
I'm going again next Tuesday and taking some special guests because I really need to see it again. It was just so incredible.
well, that sounds interesting. I mean, you did. I'm not sure if I'd seen that advertised, I'd go, it's not a nice out. That's not a fun night out.
No, but it is. It really is.
Right.
Well, if you care about children who are looked after, if you care about care experienced children and people, you will find it fascinating. And it really is. It's quite a long trek, obviously, if you don't live anywhere near London. But they are hoping to go on tour.
Sorry?
So
When is it on till, did you say?
it's on till the 3rd of August. But it's the theatre company that are doing it is called Lung Theatre. So they're a theatre company that basically perform plays that are campaigning. So
Right.
and they did some work with some care experienced young people, and this is where this is. It's been 5 years in the making, and it is absolutely incredible. And if they get enough support and enough people are interested and go and see the play, they will get to take it on tour. So that's why I really wanted to mention it, because I think the rest of the UK should and would want to see this incredible piece of work.
Well, I'm in London soon, so I might see if I can squeeze out some time. But I do like the way that you managed to turn that into a slight insult. It was really good. It's okay. It's fine. It's fine.
That wasn't my intention.
And I'm interested in all of those, but sadly I'm not over in the UK until the 12th, so I'm going to miss it. But hopefully, if there is a bit of a tour going, then you know.
Yeah, I'm feeling the burn, so I'm going to stay quiet. Because like, if I was interested, then I would enjoy it.
You have no choice now. Yeah.
No, I feel shamed into going. I'm gonna have to take a photograph and send it to you of me outside the theatre.
Yes, please.
Right, I flipping will now. Sarah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate you sort of giving your time up to us, because I know it's a lovely evening, and you probably could be sat outside, doing whatever you do outside in the weather.
I'm at my desk working. I'm a workaholic and I quite enjoy it. So I don't try and pretend about it anymore. So thanks. So to be honest, it's been a lovely alternative way for me to spend my evening and not just doing emails. I've really enjoyed it. Great conversation.
Saved your fingertips. Well done.
Yeah. Well, so look after yourself. Stay well.
Thank you.
Please come back in the autumn.
I will. Thank you. Nice to meet you both.
And you. Bye-bye.
Bye.